Going beyond description, we may take the purpose of history to be reaching an understanding of the past. This may be broadly in two different senses. For an empathetic understanding, let's say verstehen, of past science, which involves seeing the world fully in the actors' categories, it goes without saying that knowing the content of past science is crucial. For a more externalist, explanatory type of understanding, looking not so much for empathy but for causes and influences, the content of science may not be so central. But content must still constitute an important part of the explanandum, or what we want to explain. Description and understanding aside, there is also the persistent impulse to use the past and its knowledge for our purposes. This is risky business, but all we can do is try to do it well, rather than avoid it and let unprofessional or unscrupulous people do it badly. This is a big debate, of course, in political history all the time. I think the same should be happening in history of science. There is much debate about what kind of lessons or at least experience can be gained from the past, and it is widely accepted that history is routinely used to give individuals and groups a sense of identity. Applying these thoughts to history of science brings us back to science policy and science education, and also to the place of history of science in the life of practicing scientists. For myself, as mentioned earlier, another important use of history is to improve scientific knowledge itself. It is not difficult to see that the usefulness of history of science would be enhanced by a serious engagement with its content. Now, a particular use of history, which I set aside here under separate heading, is to allow the understanding of the past to liberate us from the past itself. Contingent decisions made in the past shape our present. Identifying those elements of past contingency allows us to see what what may seem like an oppressive necessity or inevitability in our present situation actually was and can be again a matter of human choice. This rather psychoanalytic insight, perhaps not a mainstream view in general historiography, but it has a very respectable pedigree, including Goethe, Delphi, Marot, and Benedetto Croce, who gave us this famous dictum: only historical judgment liberates the spirit from the pressure of the past. Our scientific life, too, can benefit from understanding the apparent necessity of today as a consequence of past contingency. And for this, the historian must delve into the details of the arguments that took place among past scientists. Finally, there is a particular kind of understanding of the past that I want to set aside as a separate purpose. An exuberant expression of this purpose comes from Henri Marot, who says, "I will assign to history as one of its essential functions the enrichment of my internal universe by recapturing cultural valuables salvaged from the past. They exist in the bosom of lost societies or civilizations, but to the extent that we are capable of grasping and understanding them, they again come to life in us. In a sense, they acquire a new reality and a second historical existence in the womb of the historian's thought and in the contemporary culture to which he reintroduces them." And I apply this insight to science. More briefly, here's Bartol Niebuhr, who says, "He who calls what has vanished back again into being enjoys a bliss like that of creating." Thank you, Jim Secord, for this quotation. There's no reason why these insights should not apply in history of science, as I discussed earlier, in terms of recovery and connoisseurship. I would like to conclude on a pluralistic note. In this lecture, I have pushed strongly a particular vision of the functions of the discipline of history of science, and try to argue that critical attention to the content of science is required for serving those functions. But there are many diverse modes of study included in my vision, and I also certainly do not mean to suggest that those modes of study falling outside my vision are invalid or inferior. There are no enemies here, except for those who are in the habit of making enemies, declaring that anything that doesn't fit into their own narrow-minded view of good scholarship is not history or not real history of science, and therefore not worth pursuing. The general plea I would like to make is for more conscious deliberation and debate about why we do history of science and of technology and of medicine, and how we should do it in order to achieve whatever aims we might have. Such considerations will inevitably have to examine the relationship between history of science and science itself. And I think a much more vigorous debate on this issue is crucial to the health of our discipline. My own view on that crucial relationship is that history of science should approach science with understanding and respect, even with love, but also with critical confidence and independence. Thank you very much.